Yes, again. So, welcome everyone to CME Palooza Fall 2021. This is our Sweet 16. Got off to a little bit of a delayed start, but thank you all for joining us. My name is Scott Kober. I am one of the co-producers of CME Palooza. I would like to welcome you to our kickoff session. And this session is entitled Immersive Simulations, Learning from Other Industries to Improve CME. And this session is sponsored by Med Learning Group. It will be moderated by Matthew Fries. Matthew is the general manager of Med Learning Group. So as with all of our CME Palooza sessions, I would like to start by thanking our sponsors. First, our gold sponsors, Med Learning Group, Physicians Education Resource, Projects and Knowledge. Our silver sponsors, Peer Audience, Academic CME, the Academy for Continued Healthcare Learning, Integrity Continuing Education, Hippocrates and Platform Q Health Education, and our many bronze sponsors, MedIQ, Medscape Education, CMEology, PVI, Vindigo Medical Education, RMEI, Global Education Group, Real CME, Answers in CME, Helio CME, Creative Educational Concepts, Infograph Ed, Prova Education, DKB Med, Evolve Medical Education, Right Medicine, Spire Learning, Red Med Ed, CME Outfitters, and Excalibur Medical Education. So you can ask questions during this and all of our CME Palooza sessions in two ways. You can either use the Medscape text line to send in a question. Number is 267-6660-CME, that's 0263. Or you can tweet your question to us using the CME Palooza hashtag. So in all of our CME Palooza sessions, we will be incorporating audience response questions via the Peer Audience response system. We use Poll Everywhere. So to participate, you can either download the Poll Everywhere app and join the presentation entitled CME Palooza 005, or you can type in the following URL in a web browser below. So finally, our brief speaker disclosure, just be mindful that the opinions, discussions, and or conclusions expressed during this session are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, parent company, or affiliates. So before I turn this over to Matt to get going, there's a couple audience response questions that we wanted to throw out there just to sort of level set for this session. So here's our first question. How significant a barrier is cost in the creation of highly technical CME simulations? So your choices are very significant, significant, neither significant nor insignificant, insignificant, or very insignificant. So give people a few seconds. Okay, so we're seeing, obviously, cost is a very significant or significant barrier. Okay. Let's go to the next question. Does your organization use key performance indicators within the design of digital CME learning? Your choices are yes, no, or I have no idea what you are talking about. Okay, pretty much even across the board. Okay, and our final audience response question. How often does your organization incorporate results from intra-activity question and answer sessions into your outcomes reporting? Always, frequently, sometimes, and rarely. And never. Okay, so these are topics that we're going to be talking about, that our panelists will be talking about during the session. So it's good to kind of have some a sense of kind of where our audience is. Okay, so with that said, I am now going to turn this over to Matt to introduce the rest of the panel and to get us started. So take it away, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And congratulations on year 16. Super exciting. Pretty amazing. So thank you to CME Palooza. Thank you to Scott and Derek for all the work you guys do each year producing this. Certainly, I think everybody in the industry appreciates it. So great opportunity. Appreciate being a part of it. Very excited to introduce my colleague, Lauren Welch, who many of you are familiar with from our Outcomes and Accreditation Department. But many of you probably don't know Jay McKinney. Jay is the co-founder and chief product officer of Infinico. We thought it'd be a great opportunity to learn as an industry from another industry. We've taken an opportunity over time to really get to know Jay, get to know his team, all the different product offerings that they have, and they service other industries traditionally. And just a great opportunity. Jay's super smart guy, bright guy, and I think he'll have a lot to share on what he's doing in other industries and started to do within our industry with a few programs with us. But warm welcome for Jay, and you're going to hear a lot from him today, and Lauren and I will jump in a little bit, but super excited to get going. So thanks for being here with us, Jay.
All right. And thank you for the kind introduction, Matt. So I'm going to jump right into it, and then I will show you an agenda, and then we'll move forward. Have a few fun things to share with the team here today, as well as the overall audience. Okay. All right, Matt, just confirm you can see my screen for me, please.
Confirmed.
All right, great. Okay, so here's our agenda. I'm just going to make a quick pit stop about what we think is going on with CME simulations today. And then we'll talk about emergency risk simulations, some of the work that we're doing in other industries, and why we think there's relevancy. And then we'll look at the science and the technology behind what we do. You know, we are game developers at the end of the day, but not your typical game developers. And so we'll explain a little bit about the science behind that, as well as the technology that we're using. And then we'll look into what we were able to do very quickly with MLG, Med Learning Group, regarding an actual CME simulation using our technology. And then Lauren is going to provide us some insights around reporting and competency gains, and then we'll summarize. And from what I understand, you guys are going to be asking questions through and through. So that's great. Now, Infinico, at the end of the day, what we are is a risk simulation platform. We're also an education platform. So we build simulations that help one to avoid financial collapse, such as from a cyber breach. We also build simulations that help to protect you from bodily harm or injury or loss of life. But we'll get into that maybe in a couple slides. For now, let's start at the very top. So Scott, we happened to get our hands on your previous audience response, and I think this was probably from last year. And we saw that simulations was pretty far at the bottom. And so obviously there's some opportunity to improve and maybe get this higher in the next go around. But my partner and I, Ramki Durasetti, my CEO and co-founder, we had some questions. Why was it low? Maybe there wasn't access. I don't have that box up here, but now that I'm thinking off the top of my head, maybe it wasn't accessible, meaning companies like me weren't around bringing you something that was actually affordable and can make it to market in a timely manner and can meet all your specifications. Or maybe there were companies and what they had just wasn't engaging. It lacked the quality, because you have competitors like Fortnite out there. People are used to a certain degree of quality when you say gaming or simulations. Or maybe it wasn't promoted enough, therefore the technology adoption was just a little bit low. Or maybe it was just too tough to use. Well, whatever the reasons, our goal is to help identify and pinpoint and make this a much better situation for all of us. So before I get going, I wanted to stop and just show you what we've been doing in the emergency risk simulation space. As we all know, there's so many things going on these days. Look at all of these quadrants. Cyber attacks. We continually hear about the threat from cyber attacks. Natural disaster. When people's toilet water in Texas starts to freeze over, you need to really think about the propensity for this to happen a lot more often. And then kidnap and ransom. For for those of us that have the courage to get back on a plane and really want to be in front of somebody, and you're either a key man or key woman in your organization, or you're just a high net worth individual or someone that has something to lose, you need to worry about kidnap and ransom. And then there's active shooters, civil unrest, armed intruders. We hear about this stuff all the time. But how do you get people prepared? How do you do it in a way where they achieve some sort of muscle memory, where they're not trying to figure things out? They're already feeling their way through the situation. There are a lot of ways to do that. We don't claim to have the silver bullet, but we are a bullet in the chamber for sure. So what I want to do is just show you what we've done for cyber attacks. And just to give you I got to set the stage for you before I just throw you into this. The types of clients that we typically deal with are insurance carriers that write an insurance policy for each one of these. They're brokers, cyber attorneys that represent clients, large and small, after they've been breached, forensics, government, municipalities. So these are the types of clients that we work with. And so I just wanted to set that stage for you. And so what you're going to see is a simulation of what's called a tabletop. A tabletop is basically a fire drill, a very sophisticated fire drill. And in this case, we have a supply chain company, right? Manufacturing. They go down. What happens with the C-suite? As you can see in the background picture here, people are in their pajamas. It's at night because that's the way it is. These folks need to have a plan right away, know who to talk to, know who to call, know what decisions to make, regardless of what time of the day it is. So what we've done was we've put together a simulation that shows all of this playing out. We took a few crumbs off the Hollywood dinner table, let me just put it that way, to make it exciting. So as you're watching this, think about how it can be applied in your industry, because that's what we're working on. So without further delay, I'll get started. As you can see, this is web browser enabled to make it easier for those to get access.
What did you learn?
All the US-based systems are inoperable. Email, phone, you name it. I'm going to try to contact Toronto. Can you find out what's happening in London?
Of course, but make it fast. You know where to find me.
Toronto is down too. Nothing is accessible, internally or externally.
Same in London.
Wait, I have a call coming in. Looks like it is the US IT team.
I've got one too. No, two. London and Toronto. Back in a minute. Workstations are down all over.
What a shit show. Looks like 150 servers affected all over the world. Files corrupted. On-site backups too. And, wait for it, the automated delivery system is down.
What? That means everything has stopped moving.
Yep, they found a ransom note, Beth, with an email address. From some guy called Ratso Raspberry. This is the real deal.
We need to shut down our systems.
Which systems?
All of them. Have you activated the incident response team?
How am I supposed to do that? The email and phone are out.
Don't you have the mobile app?
Sorry, of course. But, Beth, do we even have the authority to shut everything down?
I don't know if we have authority, but I do know we have no choice. I'll take responsibility. Just make it happen.
Okay, at this point, we can have engagement with the audience. We can have discussions. This can be a multiplayer thing. This can be just like what we're doing right now. We're all Zooming together using this face-to-face technology. And so we get some discussions right now, or we can just move forward and start assessing the audience. So this application that we've built also has a link that once you go to it on your device, you can get the questions and you can answer it the same way you just did the audience response. So I'm going to spend just another 30 seconds in all of this, and then we're going to get back into the other half of the presentation. So bear with me, folks.
Nabil, you have a law enforcement background. Can you negotiate with these bastards and take them down?
Maybe, but negotiation takes time. We are under a lot of pressure.
Who is Ratso Raspberry anyway? Can he be trusted to give us the decryption tool if we pay the ransom?
We shouldn't pay them a dime, ever. Call the FBI and arrest these crooks.
That's risky, Wilson. We stand to lose $5 million a day if we can't transport goods. Plus, our biggest customers can just take their business elsewhere if we can't deliver.
Where's the loyalty?
Wilson, it's already happening. Our customers can't track transports because...
Okay. So I wanted to stop right there and just let you guys know that everything that just played out is real life. We work with the actual attorneys that handle these types of breaches, the forensics folks, the people that actually went in and did all of the healing and cauterizing of the wounds. If we were to let this play out a little bit more, you would have seen a ransom note, or the actual ransom note. So nothing that you saw here was made up except for us fulfilling the imagination requirement, which is the actual simulation and platform. Now, what I have here in front of you is the sequence that we use to build everything that you see there. So the tabs up top represents the different industries that we serve. So K&R stands for kidnap and ransom, armed intruder. So all of these different areas that we focus on all follow the same sequence. As a player, you select your risk, your peril, or your situation, right? And then you choose your scenario. So as I'm going through this, I want you to think about this in your space. You know, what would your scenarios be? Well, maybe that would be a therapeutic area. Who would your player types be? That would be your MDs, your nurse practitioners, physician assistants, whoever's in that supply chain, right? And then you initiate your play. Now, as you saw in the cyber simulation, we gave you a visual backdrop. We played the scenario. We provided a lot of contextual information just by the voice actors. You understood the situation, and you were presented with decision points via discussion slides and the ability to choose your own answer. And if I did not skip a couple areas, you would have seen what we consider, what we call considerations, resources, and decisions. Now, I wanted to stop at this box here because what we're working on next is, well, what if you choose your own adventure? So you saw that little screen where you had the different options. What if after you made that choice, you go down a different path? Well, this is where we can introduce what I would like to call turbo conditional logic, really hyper what if. But we can definitely do a lot more by injecting AI into this one specific area, because that's where we start to learn the learner. We start to see who really knows the material, who's really paying attention based on how quickly and how accurately they start to answer questions. And then we can make it a lot more dynamic for them, just like what you would expect from real gameplay. So I want to take a moment and just stop and let my colleagues jump in if you have, I don't know if Matt or Lauren, you wanted to add anything to this one piece. If not, I can keep going.
Yeah, I would just say, and we'll get to this in a little more detail, but being able to select your player type allows us from an outcomes perspective to then analyze data by profession. And what Jay was just mentioning, the future AI piece is super exciting from both an instructional design and an outcomes viewpoint, because, we usually have to design our programming thinking, okay, the majority of learners are at this level of knowledge or this level of competence, so we're going to set these learning objectives. But if we can get to the point where we can understand the learner a little better, and the instructional design allows questions to get harder for those learners who are a little more experts in the field, then that opens up a whole new ball game as far as how we can impact each individual learner.
Yeah, agreed, Lauren. And I think to that point too, each time, whether it's an MD in our space anyway, an MD, physician assistant, nurse, pharmacist, they may see the same scenario, but what we really liked about this platform was you could tweak the way the questions were asked. So each audience type actually receives their own track of branching technology. So the content is a little different. The questions are a little different based on the role that you play, which is a great way of kind of looking at that overall audience. And we do a lot of focus in our industry on the team approach to care and how people communicate and how they work together. And I think the simulation Jay just showed in another industry of all these different folks having different responses and responsibilities is very similar to what we see when you enter any specialty group or enter a hospital. And the fact that you can build such real life examples, a lot of the adult learning theory that we focus on when we're trying to create education is to put the learner in the experience, make it as real as possible. And that kind of Hollywood piece Jay referred to does make it really engaging. And the fact that their system allows for this AI piece where it can build upon the learner's response and make questions tougher over time for the audience level, as we see what the specialty does, is also very unique. And you can kind of keep driving it, keep pushing for a different and better outcome each time with the patient scenario that they're facing. So yeah, no, those are all great points, Jay.
Thank you, guys.
So Jay, there's one question that came over the Medscape text line I want to throw into you. So the question is, so how many members of a team are responsible for developing these sorts of complex scenarios, and who are sort of the key members of the team that are involved?
Okay, so I'll start with the key members. So there is an illustrator, there is an animator, and there are programmers. Sometimes the illustrators and animator can be the same person, but that's very rare. We probably only have one person that can do that. So for now, there's illustrator, there's an animator, there is the programmer, and that programmer is actually a game developer, because this is actually a gaming platform that we're using, very similar to building what you probably saw, Fortnite, Call of Duty. But all in all, there is also a business analyst, that what we call a creative business analyst. They elicit all of the requirements from the client, and then they translate it into artwork specs, programming specs, and then specs for the actual voiceovers. Depending on how many characters are needed, that will swell the size of the team. But our team is probably about 5 or 6 individuals working in a matter of weeks to get a lot of this into play.
And I would just add, you know, from a CME perspective, when you are then developing it, you know, you have your faculty, your national experts, our medical director, who work hand in hand with the team to make this applicable to what our therapeutic area is.
Yeah, actually, the medical director, they literally are like the director of the movie. And if they've never done this before, we put them through a really cool crash course, and they become pros overnight. That's what we've been seeing. So it's a really nice dream team at the end of the day. Okay, so let me pick up here. So at the end of all of this, we give them an opportunity to go back and course correct because of the branching capability. Then there's scoring. We are spending a lot of time in analytics. We want to be able to show you guys how you compare against your peers within the industry or within just the platform that we're using. So we know how important that is. And then of course, your takeaways or certificates. All right, so I'm gonna breeze through the science and the technology a little bit. A lot of you folks, I'm gonna assume you have a lot more understanding than normal folks when it comes to how people learn because of what we all do for a living, right? And so we look at that very closely too. When we started building this back in 2018, we were working with some folks who, one was a neurologist, another one was a neurosurgeon, and they were both friends of mine. And so they gave us some really interesting pointers to build in. And so what we focus on mainly is intuition, muscle memory, and decision intelligence, being able to make decisions quickly in high consequence situations. And so these are all of the different elements that we try to put into the science. And we're always learning, of course, how to do this better. But then there's the technology, which came a little easier to us because we're, you know, technology guys at the end of the day and beginning of the day. And so, yes, we are focused heavily on analytics, being able to reach that path where we can give you decision trees, and then putting it on a gaming engine so that we can introduce mobile, AR, VR, all of the different areas that fall into gaming. But I highlighted some key bullets here because this is what's going to make the difference for those that test out the platform and decide that they want to come back. The adaptive branching, the decision consequences, all of the things I've been kind of echoing, but ultimately we'll have the ability to learn the learner. And that's very, very close in the near future. All right, so just want to take a moment. Matt, Lauren, you guys want to add anything? Scott, we good with questions? We good with time? Okay.
I think we're doing well on time, Jay. We should be okay. I think, you know, I would just add from the perspective of our group, you know, we kind of put a lot of time into looking at partners, looking at different innovations. So always challenging ourselves. And I think one of the things within CME that we can do is really look at other industries. So we found Jay and his team through an RFP process, looking at technologies and going out to different shows to see what other people are doing. And they answered one of our RFPs with this idea of what they can do from a simulation perspective. And then we were fortunate enough to have you know, a few supporters provide an opportunity for us to test it out, and it went really well. But what was cool is every time we've designed one in the few we've done, it's gotten better and better, a smoother process, a better end program, and the simulations are just awesome. Like we get great notes from the participants that go through them on, you know, how real the scenario was, the decision point making, the reporting that they get after, seeing a score that they get against their peer to see where they sit. You know, it makes a level of engagement and fun into the scenario that I just think is fantastic. So just our takeaways is we're always looking for kind of the next great thing and different things and what they have. And this was just a really cool way of doing it with all the different aspects. So I think Jay has one that we designed with him and his team was just, again, fantastic with working with our group, who's really a novice when it comes to the simulation area, and they made it super easy.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate you. All right, so I showed you guys a sequence of an emergency preparation, and so this is what the sequence of an actual CME situation room is starting to look like. So I'll just quickly come in here. So here's your player role selection. All right, you can see all of the different roles, and then as you're going through the gameplay, we have little areas where you can pull up patient information, history, lab results, special test results, and such. And we go back and forth between 3D and 2D. So here's an example of something that we did with the 3D look, but I'm going to show you a demo using 2D. And then, of course, here are assessment questions. Now we can make this look any way you need it to look. I mean, that's just the way that we built it out of the box. We wanted to make it easy to see what you got correct, what you got wrong, and make sure that you have access to supporting material so that you can answer the question accordingly. All right. And then there are some opportunities depending on how much we need to go into details. You can see here she has a very bad skin condition, so we're able to model that effectively to make it as real as possible. And then there's feedback and review slides and the summary cards and such. So I'll just move to the next slide, and at this point, I'm just going to go into the latest simulation. So Matt and team, they gave us an opportunity to assist them with a lot of the great work that they're doing with COVID, one of their programs. And Matt said, hey, can you create a very quick SR for us? And so that gave birth to what we consider to be a micro SR, where it's a short little engagement. And so I just want to go ahead and show you an example of that.
Hi, Sally. We're going to begin your infusion of monoclonal antibodies in a couple of minutes. I just need to ask you a few questions first. Can you tell me a little bit about when you first began to have symptoms of COVID-19?
Sure. Last Saturday, I felt like I was coming down with something. I was very tired and my body ached. By the end of the day, I had a headache and a fever too. 3 days later, I started to cough and had some trouble breathing. I called my doctor.
At any time, you can click and see all of the different charts that I was telling you about. Video in the background.
And she
stops.
said to go to a COVID testing.
You can bring up the faculty video right there. In a moment, that'll start up.
My name is Tina Stosser. I'm a professor of infectious disease
Center. I got my results back yesterday and they were positive for COVID-19.
Okay, so we'll stop here. I think you guys got the idea. Very different experience compared to what I showed you with cyber, but there's a lot of opportunity to bring a lot of the theatrics and the energy and the emotion that you saw into this space as well.
So Jay, if I can pause you here for a second, we got a couple questions on the Medscape text line. So the first question is a two-parter, and I think this is probably what we're hearing a lot is cost, question mark, and how long does it take to put one of these things together?
Okay, so in terms of the timing that it takes, it can take us anywhere from 3 weeks to, I would say, 2 to 3 months. It depends on the complexity of the situation room. So you heard me mention the term micro situation room. So those are your 3-week situation rooms, like the one that you saw. And then if you're talking about a lot of different tracks, medical tracks within a therapeutic area, one for a doctor, one for a nurse practitioner and such. And it depends on how many questions, how long is the dialogue between patient and provider, then that also determines the time. And you may want it in another language. You may want different scenarios that represent different parts of the country or such, or neighborhood or demographics. All of that plays into the timing. Terms of cost, I really can't even answer that because we're so highly specific with what we do. We initially wanted to become a SaaS platform, but we realized everyone has their own unique edge, and so we saw an opportunity to just cook to order. We're using very, very little. I mean, again, and just from other industries, we're still so new to the CME space. We don't have an exact answer, but in other industries, sometimes costs can just go literally from 5,000 to 6 figures. Again, it's very hard to determine, but I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to comment on that, what your experience has been like with some of the others.
Yeah, no, I think that they're good questions because especially with the kind of the ARS stuff we asked earlier and people thinking, big barrier there. And I think there are certainly costs that go into it, especially because you're looking at 2 different organizations, right? There's the cost of obviously the developers on Jay's side, but also content creators, the faculty, videos, however complex you want to make it. And I think that we found with this team is we can kind of look at what goes into the scenario and everything changes the cost, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 4 specialties, whether it's one scenario that we need in 3 weeks, like COVID, where it was an urgent scenario. We couldn't wait 3 months to get something out. We needed people to know how you treat these patients right away. So we said, look, we have 3 weeks. We need to put this together. We need to map it out, use your 2D, and that saves some time in terms of the development. And we found ways to do that. So I think very adaptable in that way. And then same with the cost structures, very adaptable in terms of what worked from, whether it was a 10-minute scenario or a 20-minute scenario with faculty videos and 3 different scenarios that we wanted to build. The one thing I will say too that's been really great is as we've created once that hospital room is created or that infusion chair is designed, the next time you go to do that simulation, it's done. That part of it's done. So you're able to recreate, and Jay's team does a great job of kind of leveraging what's already there, and your costs go down over time. So I think that there's, like anything else, it's applicable. And the last point that I'm excited about is we found a way to kind of utilize these in different spaces where Jay was like, because originally we thought, okay, this is all just an online activity, but it could be done during a Zoom where you show the scenario and then you have people talking and engaged about the simulation and then answering polling questions. You can make them downloadable so people can play them on their phone and just take part in that as opposed to the larger presentation. So you can do it in these micro bites. So it doesn't all have to be 30 minutes in front of a computer. You can do it in 8. And then you have access to all the resources. So that's been really cool. And then Lauren, I think from an outcomes perspective, has kind of seen a different view of what's measurable, which is also, exciting.
Yeah, on that note, Jay, if we want to just pull up those last couple slides we had, I can just share, as I kind of mentioned earlier and Matt mentioned, this format allows us to do a much deeper dive into outcomes for an enduring program, or if it's incorporated into a live program. We can one of our polling questions was, are there interactivity Q&As incorporated into your outcomes? This format allows us to do that very easily. So you're not just relying on your 4 or 5 pre-post questions for your knowledge and competence gains. You have case-based scenarios that also provide for a deeper look at competence gains. And you can also look at it as a tract. So we have our scoring. So at the end of the day, at the end of the game, when we're doing our outcomes, we can say, nurse practitioner scored this, oncologist scored this, and gastrologist overall scored this throughout the program, for just sort of a quick baseline look. And then you can also use the answers to the case-based questions as well as your pre-post test to look at that more closely. And finally, as we were mentioning, with the future of this, as we get more into AI, we'll be able to make the individual learners' questions that they experience more complex based on their previous answers, which will really allow us to make sure that the education we're providing is really useful for each individual learner, which really, will change the ballgame for how we look at our learning objectives and allow us to cover a lot more ground within an individual therapeutic area. I'm not sure, we might be having some trouble with the slides. We do have a couple of examples that we can show very quickly, but I think what I just said really just provides the gist of that.
Let me reshare, see what's going on. Give me 1 second.
So as Jay is bringing this up, there's another question that came in, Matt and Lauren, if you want to talk to this probably real quickly. How do you determine the amount of credit hours for one of these simulations?
Yeah. So I think we do it based on time, as always, in terms of having it go through. So what we do is, if it's just a scenario with the simulation and without a faculty video, where you obviously have the time, but if it's a scenario, then we just have 2 or 3 peer reviewers go through it, take the average of that time. If it was a half hour, if it was a quarter credit, half a credit, full credit, and we just beta test it until we kind of have an idea of the length, and then we assess credit.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and this is just an example from the asthma situation room that Jay was displaying earlier, where you can see for each learning objective, we can look at what our outcomes are by profession. We can also, on the previous slide, I think we had it by profession, and we have.
Let me go back one, because I didn't know that it wasn't broadcasting. Let me give you an opportunity to speak to it, Lauren.
Thank you. So here you see this was an asthma one, and we had a track for pulmonologists and a track for allergists and immunologists, and we were able to look at both the interactivity Q&A and the pre-post to see how learners adjusted. And then to the right, you can see, so the patient's FEV1 score, which is an important indicator in asthma, the simulated patient's FEV1 score went up or down based on how the learner performed during the activity. So we were able to look at the overall results per audience group, which I think gives a great snapshot for when you're looking at future education for targeted audiences. And once you do this, then you can do it again. You can look at some longitudinal data like we had on the next slide. So all in all, this provides so much more detail to what you can present. In other outcomes reports, we've actually shared the individual case questions that learners may have. Their answers were very notable. You can pull that out very quickly with a quick screenshot from the program itself.
Okay, so in summary, spent a little time looking at some of the poll results from the last CME Palooza CME that you had. And so when we look at it in 2022, hopefully that will be on the rise. And I've shown you some examples from the emergency risk simulations. some that we're working on right now involve something called express kidnapping. This is when you get abducted and you find yourself dropped off someplace and you don't have money. So that's one of the areas that we're working with the carriers to bring that to life. And so whatever we learn in that space, we'll see what's applicable here. We'll continue to develop the science and technology, working with Med Learning Group, and we'll be rolling out more CME simulations in the near future, as well as additional data drill down that Lauren will be able to share regarding reporting and competency gains. And so I wanted to give one more opportunity to ask some questions, at this time. But if not, then we're good to go. But so I'll hand it back over to you, Scott. Let me know.
So we do have one more question that came over the Medscape text line. So the question is the CME partner responsible for all design flow and dialogue, or is that something that Infinico provides creative support about?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. And the way that we work in this particular space, all that we require is the actual dialogue between the patient as well as the provider. And then we provide the design, the layout, the sequence, and then they will sign it off. They'll say, you know what, we actually don't want that chart in the background. We actually go into the very details of the furniture in the room, the clothing, the gender of the people, the ethnicity, the size. We use what's called a playbook, which is just a very elaborate Excel workbook that captures all of these details, all of the attributes of the scene, of the people, of the dialogue. And so their medical directors are extremely instrumental in this process, because they're the ones that work with the faculty to provide us with all of the details to make it real. And then we do everything else to make it engaging.
Okay, one more question that came in, and this is probably better for Matt and Lauren. How has it been working with faculty on these programs, and how well have they been able to sort of get up to speed on what they've needed to do?
Yeah, great question. So, we always think, oh, is it going to be something different, than just presenting slides or cases, which is what they're used to. And we're always surprised by how engaged they get. So we've actually had, in the few we've done, just fantastic faculty who are super excited to see the storyboards. It's something different. They like how real life it is. They can go into the sim at any point during the build and look at it and say, oh no, this doesn't make sense, or you need to pull that chart, or that patient would never be standing over a table. So they can quickly go in and tell us what adjustments to make, and the platform's super easy to use. So from a design perspective, they get into it, and we're not taking all that much more of their time than we are when we build a deck. It's a little bit of extra time, but it's not overkill. And I think they like that there's something different. And then we usually have them present a video that goes alongside the simulation, so that people better understand how to go through the scenario, because they're getting the latest data. They can see the faculty presentation, which could be 15 minutes, could be a half hour, could be an hour, and they can choose to watch it or watch chapters of it. But it gives them a good idea of the backup for what's going on in the scenario. So it's kind of a twofold for the faculty.
All right, great. As we're kind of getting this wrapped up, just want to remind people who are watching this session, whether you're watching it live or the enduring version, there is a brief survey at the bottom of our live tab to get a sense of who's watching CME Palooza Fall, and that we use to kind of help plan future iterations of CME Palooza. So if you can please take a few minutes to complete that survey when you have a chance. And for those folks who are watching this live, there is no longer any need to refresh your browser to view the next session. Just look on our live page and click the appropriate session link. It'll start shortly, here in about 4 minutes at the top of the hour. So with that, I want to thank Jay and Matt and Lauren for your participation, and we will see everyone in a couple minutes.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.